Okay, I want to introduce Casey Lyons from NorCal Tracon. He can give you his background and anything else that that he's going to start with here. But anyway, we had to work kind of hard to get a controller out here, I think, with the situation, the short staffing and everything. So we're really fortunate that we have Casey here. And if you have any questions, either this hour or the next hour, which is devoted to questions, please make sure you get them questioned and answered here. So anyway, Casey, thank you. And there you go.
All right. My name is Casey Lyons. I've been air traffic controller for about 23 years now. I started in the Marine Corps in 2000. I did air traffic control there at Miramar for about 4 years and then moved on and got hired by the FAA in 2007. I started at LAX. I did that for about 5.5 years. And I've been at NorCal Tracon since 2012. I work in Area E, which we're divided up into 5 different areas. I'll kind of go through those here in a minute. But Area E consists of the airspace all around Sacramento. So it's this it's this polygon that you can kind of see all around here. Our altitudes kind of vary. We have overlapping airspace with Travis out in here. Center is all around here. We also do the airspace around Reno. There, that's Reno. The map that you see that kind of overlies the video map is the minimum vectoring altitude map with all the different numbers, 12, 9100, all those. This is the final. The other areas, so you have Area A, they do like Monterey, San Jose, South Bay stuff. Just to clarify, all of the areas, we all specialize in our own little airspace. So I work Sacramento and Reno, but I do not work San Francisco finals or San Jose finals or anything like that. So if you have Bay Area questions, I'm not the guy. So the Area A will do like Watsonville, Salinas, Monterey, San Jose. It's all kind of South Bay, that kind of stuff. B, they do nothing but San Francisco rivals. They are hyper specialized on just running San Francisco. They have all their feeder sectors and then they have final sectors. And depending on what the weather is like, they even have what's called parallel monitors. So they've got like a super high resolution scope that's zoomed in and they're just looking for aircraft that might be transgressing into the other final because they run parallel runways there. The Area C, they do Oakland, San Joaquin Valley, Central Valley, that kind of stuff. D, they do nothing but departures for San Francisco and Oakland, a lot of Bay Area departures. They also have overflights. And then you get to E, which is us. So we have non-contiguous airspace is what they call it. So you got Oakland Center in between us and the California side of our airspace.
Where's the Tracon building located?
The Tracon building is located about 2 miles east of Mather. We're kind of about right. This is a little shaky, sorry. We're kind of like right there. So when I go out for walks on my breaks, I can like watch the Mather final going like slightly south of us. We have, if you've ever flown over there, there's a bunch of solar panels kind of right there. We're kind of a little bit, I guess it'd be north of the Mather Golf Course. That's our building. The airspace kind of in total at NorCal Tracon is about 21,000 square miles. When we go, for the most part, our airspace is surface to flight level 19 or 0. Center owns above that. And obviously the towers have their delegated airspace. So you got like the class Ds and the Cs. So they're responsible for those airspace. The training program at NorCal depends on the area. If you are in Area B, let's say, and the traffic is a little bit more consistent, you might be able to check out a little faster. It's pretty proceduralized there. Area E is probably somewhere in the vicinity of 2 years, maybe somewhere roughly around that. It's It's a little bit more chaotic in this airspace because a lot of it is, for charting purposes, uncontrolled uncontrolled airspace, or there's not as many regulations. So we have to get used to dealing with that. I came from working with almost exclusively professional pilots, and then you go to people who are training, and it's a little bit of an adjustment period. What the training program looks like is you go to Oklahoma City, and you, depending on what you're doing, you're either terminal or en route, tower, or Tracon. So I had a military CTO, so when I went to LAX, I didn't go to Oklahoma City. I just went straight to LAX. However, when I transitioned over to the Tracon environment, they had me go to Oklahoma City. You go there for roughly 4 months. They put you through a bunch of simulations, a bunch of classroom training. Don't know what just happened, but it's my computer. Okay. They put you through a bunch of simulations, a bunch of classroom training. You have to pass a bunch of tests, and then they say, yeah, cool, you can go on to your facility. When you get to your facility, you do a whole bunch more training that's specific to your area. So it's all, every approach chart that you can think of for Lincoln, Auburn, Marysville, Nevada County, all of it, we are testing on all of those approach charts. We have to know them all. They even want us to know weather minimums, even though that's not technically our responsibility, but we kind of go through that. And then once you test out of that, you go into a simulation lab. In the sim lab, it's all just simulations, but it looks just like what you saw there. Once you graduate from that, there's different steps. Step 1, 2, 3, 4. Once you graduate from that, you can actually go out and train with an instructor on the floor. That is, depending on the sector, anywhere from 80 to 120 hours of actual on-the-job instruction. And then if you're deemed good enough to pass, then they will do a certification skill check where you actually work live traffic with the supervisor, and you pretty much have to do it perfect. And then you can be certified to work on your own. They call it under general supervision. So there'll be, a supervisor walking around behind you, kind of making sure everything's okay. And then you just progress through that for all the sectors in your airspace. And once you're done, you're considered a certified professional controller, CPC. So I'll show you. So this is our airspace. There is 5 different sectors. These dotted lines are our sector boundaries. So if you look at this one here, this one is actually 2 sectors. There's a low altitude sector and a high altitude sector, which are almost never decombined. We almost always have these combined together. They're called, internally, we have names for them. They're called Elkhorn and Buttes, these 2 sectors. So pretty much what you're working on this configuration, if Sacramento International Southwind, you're working the Sacramento International Final. You're working Marysville, Beale, Oroville, Lincoln, Auburn, Grass Valley up there. And you're working that surface to flight level 19 So going back to that training regimen, if you were to train, you would be just training on Elkhorn and Buttes until you were certified. And then once you're done with that, you'll get what we call seasoning time. You'll just sit there and work yourself, probably for a month or 2, build up some experience, and then you'll move on to whatever your next sector is going to be. So we have Elkhorn and Buttes up here. This little kind of looks like a little boot right here is called Delta. When Sacramento International is on Northwind, you run the final for Sacramento International, it would look somewhere right here. I wasn't able to pull up every single video map. Sacramento Executive, we run the approaches into Rio Vista, Lodi, mostly only jump aircraft right there, and a whole bunch of VFRs going back and forth between the mountains and the Bay Area. They all transition through there. That's called Delta. This one here for us is called Expo. So that one primarily works departures off Sacramento International. So most of our departures, we do have the ones that go up to Seattle that go up over Red Bluff. So they'll make a left turn out here like that. But almost all of them are going either eastbound or southeastbound down this way. You work Sacramento International departures, you work McClellan, Mather, some executive arrivals because they're almost always on runway 20, Placerville, and that's Jackson out there. And then there's a high altitude sector that sits over the top of all this that's called Paradise. And they start at 10,000 and they go up to flight level 190. I'm sorry about this, guys. There we go. Yeah, you might want to move the cursor around a little bit or something. What you see kind of on this quick little thing that I did, this is depicting weather. So what you see there is like heavy precipitation that's depicting weather. We don't depict the clouds, we only depict precipitation. So if there's clouds, we are not unless they have some sort of precipitation that's going to happen, we don't necessarily see that. So because you'll get pilots on these arrivals that are like, hey, I want to deviate around a bunch of these nasty looking clouds. Okay, which way do you want to go? Because I don't see anything. So so we have 5 different sectors, and then we also have the Reno airspace. That's called Silver and Nugget. Those are, generally speaking, those are always combined. They're worked together. It's a little bit easier to work the airspace that way. That's a whole nother training program to get going on that airspace. It's almost like it used to be its own separate Tracon until right before I got to NorCal. So I'm going to say 2010. And so you basically are learning like a whole separate Tracon over here. Primarily, we start on the California airspace and work our way through it. And then the final thing we do is Reno. The other areas do the same thing. It's all subdivided into the various sectors, and then they just do kind of one at a time. Pretty much almost always you get, like if you're in Area B, San Francisco, you're going to do all the feeder sectors, so the higher altitude stuff. And then the last thing, this is just generalization, last thing you're going to do is the finals. So the final, you're working the actual final controller. Pretty similar in most other areas. So the unique thing about our airspace is we are our own, almost always our own feeder and our own final controller. So I am getting aircraft. So the kind of the traffic flow we'll focus on like the northern part of our airspace here, since Lincoln is right there. The way I will get aircraft is, I actually had a picture of it. Okay, so right here, what you're looking at is the descend via arrivals overlaid on our video map. We can pull up all kinds of extra maps. I have a minimum vectoring altitude map that I'll show you that you might have seen before. These are all of our descend via arrivals for this particular chunk of airspace. So right here you have the slammer arrival. So these are for the airliners that are coming into Sacramento International. They're the only ones that are going to be flying this. Anybody that's coming into Sacramento International, because the descend via arrival is specifically tied into an airport. They almost always tie in the last fix on the descend via arrival is almost always an IAF for an instrument approach into the airport. So what you're seeing here is this is all this kind of about the lateral navigation that they're going to be doing. And then there is crossing altitude. So they can cross this fixed slammer between 17 and 12, and they're supposed to be at 280 knots. Poser at or above 8, then you get to 10 co at 4. So we're talking about Lincoln specifically. When you get an IFR release off of Lincoln, this is the Lincoln runway 15 final. We don't have the 33 final depicted, although Rossi is right there. So you'll get assigned an altitude of 3,000 feet. We'll give you cleared as filed or via Marysville or something like that. And you'll get an altitude of 3,000 feet. The reason you get that is because these descent vias are stopping at 4 right there. That's a hard altitude. They got to stop at 4. So we are until we get you radar identified, you are considered non-radar. The easiest form of non-radar separation is altitude for us. So if I have you stopping at 3 as an IFR pilot off of Lincoln, and I know these guys are stopping at 4, we're separated. I need 1,000 feet of separation for 2 IFR aircraft, so we're separated, we're good. That's part of the reason why we will assign you the altitudes that we assign. Because we have all these other procedures built in that make it so it's kind of like already procedurally done for us. The arrival that you see down here is called the Sutter arrival. These are all the guys that are coming in from SoCal, and they are flowing into all these fixes, and you will get kind of similar thing. For the most part, some of these ones that aren't kind of on a straight in, the IAF is only going to line up with that RNP approach that he had mentioned before, those radius to fix arcing approaches. So we have one called the RNAV RNAV Zulu at Sacramento International, the Yankees at Reno. RNAV, and it just kind of does a little arc right here. It's kind of difficult for us to do those because we can't determine where your base is going to be. So we might be all stacked up out here with a bunch of other rivals, and we can't determine where the base leg is going to be. So RNAV Zulu only generally works if we have the space for it, because the base and the radius turn is fixed. We can't decide where it's going to be. Whereas if I took you out for an ILS approach, it might be right here 2 miles outside the final approach fix, or it might be way up here on a 12-mile final. It just depends on what my traffic flow looks like. So that's the Sutter, and this one out here is the Bomber. It's for Travis and Concord. We don't really deal with that one a ton, but we do have those that transition through. I'll show you another. These are MVA maps. So same video map. I just took off the descend via. Now this is all of our minimum vectoring altitudes. So what this is the minimum altitude that we're allowed to start vectoring you or give you an instrument approach clearance. So maybe someone has heard before, can you maintain your own terrain and obstruction avoidance through some altitude? That is because you are, like, let's say you depart Lincoln. It mostly applies to when you're eastbound. You depart Lincoln and you're immediately climbing up into the terrain, and you call me in this 2,800 foot MVA section and you say, hey, I want my IFR clearance, but I'm at 1,500 feet or whatever the altitude might be. That's just an example. Well, you're below the minimum vectoring altitude, so I can't give you an IFR clearance there, but I can ask you if you can maintain your own terrain and obstruction avoidance. And then I can give you your clearance, because you said, if you said yes. If you said no, okay, maintain VFR and expect your clearance leaving probably 5,000, just so I can be safe. If you can't do it, I can direct you into an area of lower terrain. As you can see, it obviously gets lower down here, 1,700 feet. So, hey, if you proceed westbound, I can get you your IFR clearance, and then you can loop back around and keep your climb going. One of the other issues that commonly happens around the Northern California airspace is going out over the Sierras. You can see our minimum vectoring altitudes are fairly low. They're 10,000, 10,300, 12,000 up over Mount Rose. The center has different minimum vectoring altitudes. So they need you at 13,000 feet. So a lot of times we have got pilots that'll file for 10, 11 going out through here because everything seems okay. But if you're not on a published route or an airway, the center needs you at higher altitudes. There is, I don't remember the airway exactly, Victor 334, 344 up here. I think the published altitude is like at 11,000. So that one's pretty good. But that's the reason for getting higher altitudes over the Sierras, is like, hey, I'm way clear of the terrain. Well, center, the way their radar works is a lot different than the way our radar works. I'll take a step back for a second. So we have a lot of different radar sites. Beale has one, Travis has one, Sacramento, McClellan, and we have what's called fusion radar. We get 1 second updates. So all those radar sites work together. The radar builds a picture for us and uses all the different radar hits. Whoops, sorry about that. It uses all the different radar hits, and it will give us 1 second updates on where these targets are. The center has what's called mosaic radar, and they get 12 second updates. So yeah, so it's quite a bit different. The radar system is pretty cool over here because it is extremely accurate, and it lets us do a lot more than the center can do. So in the Tracon environment, we can use what's called passing and diverging. So like if you are crossing through another aircraft like this, as soon as you're through their projected flight path, I can keep you climbing or descending. I don't have to have my lateral separation because you're through their projected flight path. The center can't do that. The other thing the center can't do is, like, let's say you're side by side with another IFR aircraft and you want to climb, you want to get your climb going. Well, I can just do what's called divergence. So I can just give, let's say one's on a 340 heading, all I need is 15 degrees. So I usually go for a little bit more, 20, let's say, turn left heading 320 and climb. So I don't have to have 3 miles of lateral separation, I have divergence. Center can't do that. And we can do 3 miles of lateral spacing between IFR aircraft. They need 5. So there's a lot more restrictions in center airspace, not to mention their minimum vectoring altitudes.
Casey, when you're talking about divergence and convergence, are you controlling off of raw radar or ADS-B? How does that work?
So the picture doesn't look any different for us. I don't know who asked the question. Sorry. Okay. The picture doesn't look any different for us. So I don't know whether I don't know on a regular basis whether I'm getting an ADS-B hit or a raw radar hit. I'll give you a good example. The Reno airspace, the radar is down here in the valley. And it used to be that they would take the radar out for maintenance when I first started. Well, the services would be extremely reduced because we wouldn't get radar in any of these aircraft until Fallon is out in here, they have radar. And then maybe we'd get a hit off Beale. Maybe 12,000 feet. Yeah, so in the field elevation at Reno was like 4,415 or something like that. So we would see you on radar at 12,000 feet. We would discontinue Class Charlie services because this is Charlie and you need radar to do that. Now they can take the Reno radar out of service and it doesn't look any different to us because of ADS-B. We're seeing them, assuming they're ADS-B equipped, we're seeing them off the ground. And it looks no different than a radar picture. And actually, they modified our controlling document is the 7110.65. That's all about air traffic control. They actually put it in there that it's like, even if it's an ADS-B feed, you are allowed to use it for separation services. So because it just doesn't look any different, we don't have any way of knowing. We do have, I can pull up, and I did a kind of a bad job of pulling up, these are all limited data blocks, unfortunately. I can look at if I pulled up this data block and I did on our keypad, which I can show you a picture of, if I do multifunction display, I can see whatever call sign you have typed into your ADS-B and your ADS-B serial number, but that's about it. So I think the center has more capability, but for us, we only see a few items. It's really cool because I've got a button that I can push on my keypad. And if I just hear kind of, hey, who was that was calling off Lincoln? Well, I can just push the button. And if you're the only aircraft off Lincoln and you have an ADS-B call sign in there, I can be like, hey, November 12345, was that you? Yeah, it was me. Okay, cool. So before I couldn't see any call signs. So I'm like, who was that? That was all I could say. But now I kind of have an idea. Or I might catch something Zulu. All right, well, I'm gonna push that button and I'm gonna see who out here has a Zulu on the end of their call sign. Okay, hey, there they are up there by Oroville or something. So to get back to your initial question, yeah, the radar picture doesn't look any different for us, and it's actually pretty cool. Every once in a while we get surprised. The other day we were working it without the Reno radar was being maintained, and the Southwest departed and didn't have their ADS-B turned on, and towers calling, hey, that guy's out there. It didn't end up being a big deal, but I didn't see them until they were about out of 10,000. They had an issue with their DSB that they didn't know about until they departed. I'll show you kind of the equipment that we work on real quick. Okay, so this is kind of what the star screen that we work on looks like zoomed out. So we've got like some little dials and buttons over here that mostly all they do is they move the maps around and turn up intensity on the maps and that kind of stuff. Zoom in, zoom out. We do have some maps up here, like some quick look maps, so you can pull up your MVA map real easily. We have something called an EOVM map. It's emergency obstruction video map. It's basically the actual altitudes of any obstructions that might be out there. If you get yourself into a situation where we need to give you emergency vectors, we know exactly where the terrain is at the exact altitude that the terrain is at, and we can give you vectors to try to get you away from the terrain. There's a map that does the airways. There's a map that shows the highways and the lakes and stuff. GPS fixes. This is kind of what our keyboard looks like right here. So it is an ABC keyboard. That's something that we have to get used to because everybody's used to QWERTY keyboards. And then there's a whole bunch of kind of other little stuff in there. But yeah, like the button that I would push is right there up in that top left corner, and it shows me all the ADS-B information. Yeah, these are just, alphanumerics, but there's all kinds of specialized commands that you need to learn to input information into the data block. So this is a kind of a better one of what our data blocks. They don't look exactly like this anymore. They're a little bit different. This is kind of an old image that I was able to dig up. So you've got a call sign. Well, the first thing I'll point to is like the little C or E or D, right? So before I said, hey, this airspace is Elkhorn and Buttes. Well, our little tag is an E, so you can look at that tag and see who's working that aircraft. This one's on a D tag, which means Delta. This sector all down in here is working it. M is Mather Tower. C is Center. And then you can see the call sign. So we got Southwest 2263 there at flight level 300, and they're doing 460 knots. Our speeds are all ground speeds. We do not know your airspeed. We have to ask. And then these typically timeshare with, and this screenshot is not really on a, they all timeshare on the same, they're all kind of synced up, but it would kind of say what this aircraft is doing. And then in this other part, instead of the speed, it's going to give me the type aircraft. So it kind of flashes back and forth between, let's just say he's just flying around this one's just flying around the local area. It'll flash LCL right here, and then it'll say what Cessna 172 or whatever right there. Now we have the way we do wake turbulence is all categorized based off of the type of aircraft. So there'll be another extra little letter here that gives their wake recat category, so we can look at that. So if you're like in a Airbus 350, that's a category B, and you're out in front of a Cessna 172, which is a category E or I or something, we have a table that we can look up and it says, hey, we need 8 miles between those two aircraft for wake turbulence. So it's kind of an easier way to just at a glance know what the wake recat category is. We put all kinds of information in these data blocks. So when you depart Lincoln in your VFR, let's say, you'll say, hey, I'm going from here to there, and I'm at this altitude, and I'm climbing to this altitude. We put your requested altitude in there. We put your destination in there, call sign, all that stuff. The reason we ask you what your current altitude is because this mode C readout right here, we're required to validate it whenever you guys call us. Let's see, your other useful information is obviously the speed, right? When we're trying to sequence aircraft into airports, you got your 80 knot guy versus your 180 knot guy. You're gonna need a lot of space there, because you've got 100 knots of overtake. So that's valuable information for us. Let's see here, what else can I tell you about these data blocks? We can change almost all of this information on our keyboards. This right here is what is called a point out. So a point out is something that is just this aircraft, if I had to make a guess, because this is Travis's airspace. So this aircraft was radar identified by Travis, and they're going to kind of sort of get in our airspace a little bit, but not all the way. So they do what's something called a point out. So the technical definition of a point out is they're just transferring radar identification. So they're telling us, hey, this guy's out there, but they're not transferring communications. So all they're doing is saying, hey, this guy's out there, and they're going to be doing X, Y, and Z, whatever it is they're doing, probably running some kind of an approach out there. So please don't run any aircraft near him. These ones out in here, like this, are just 1200 code aircraft. So all these guys down here are just 1200 codes. This is Charlie Airspace right here. So I think, do I have a Charlie Airspace map? Or you actually have one on your slide somewhere. But as long as they're not, you got the inner Charlie ring and the outer Charlie ring, and as long as you're not in there, you don't have to be talking to ATC. So we get a lot of these guys transitioning around a lot. So that descent, one of those descent vias that I had showed you earlier, kind of comes through here, and this is pretty good flyway. They'll go over the top of the Charlie airspace. So we're doing whatever we need to do to dodge those aircraft quite a bit. That's pretty much like what we're doing in Area E. Is we're working with a lot of VFRs, and we are, making sure that all these airliners that are blending in and out of all these other airports are staying clear. So I've had departures where I'm like, turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right, because you're just zigzagging around VFRs. Because you can't guarantee that they're going to, especially if this 9100 was right out in here, that nothing's out climbing that. So you're turning, you're getting away from them. So this is what all the air route traffic control centers are kind of divvied up like. So you've got what you have is like this Oakland Center is the center that works around our airspace, and we're delegated like a little chunk of airspace kind of in the middle here and out in here. So they kind of think about it as like we sit on top of the tower airspace, and the center sits on top of us and surrounds us also, because they work hundreds of thousands of square miles. They also do a lot of oceanic non-radar stuff. So these are all the different centers. Oakland Center is out in Fremont. LA Center is like in Palmdale. So yeah, so a lot of these centers work a ton of airspace, and it's the same thing as what kind of I described before, is they're all divvied up into different sectors, and who knows even how many sectors there are in some of these huge centers, The way it kind of works is they technically like permanently delegate airspace to us. There's kind of all these little subdivisions of everything.
Question, Casey.
Go ahead.
As long as we're talking to you, transitioning up through the valley or wherever the case may be, do we have to worry about Beale's TFR, or we're good to go through
So it's been a minute since I've looked at the way that TFR is. That's just the only reason I pulled this one up. It's a canceled letter airman, but it kind of gives you the general shape of all of NorCal Tracon's airspace. So it's been a minute since I've looked at that TFR. That is the Air Force's TFR. It's not NorCal Tracon or the FA's. The last time I looked at it is as long as you're talking to ATC, you can proceed through that TFR. And I'm pretty sure that still stands. I don't think the Air Force has any intention of getting rid of that TFR anytime soon. Just FYI.
That's based on future mission.
I couldn't possibly say.
Because the RP4's been gone for a while.
I don't know. I have no idea. It's like they say we want it, we're going to keep it. Okay. So I couldn't possibly tell you why. Yes, sir.
You happen to know, I mean, it shows hot on the weekend, but their tower's closed?
I believe it's a 24/7 TFR. So it just sits on top of the Charlie airspace all the time, regardless of whether the tower's open or closed. So, yeah.
It's a permanent TSA.
Yes, sir. So the objective of the TFR is mostly to, hey, call ATC, get flight following, you can go through there, and then only deviate around the TFR if we tell you to deviate around the TFR. There used to be a lot more activity. You said there used to be a lot more activity out there, and now there isn't. So, but again, way above my pay grade, and they say they're going to keep it. So I don't have any answers for you as to why.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
if you're parking here, like to the west or northwest, wanting to do some maneuvering, going out, checking things out, does it help you to contact you if we're just going to be? I've got a couple of times where I've gone out and then I, done what I'm going to do. I want to come back and maybe do a practice approach, and ATC has just commented, hey, when you go out, there's aircraft coming in the SAC. So is it helpful to you for us to reach out to you, even though we don't want flight following? We just want to let you know we're going to be out there? Or?
It can be helpful. We can tell you about any of the aircraft that are out there, or we might give you a suggestion. Like if you set out to the west specifically, so it happens all the time. They want to be like out in here. I don't know what's out there that's so exciting, but that's on a 10-mile final at Sacramento International. And I didn't pull up we actually have a map that we can pull up that shows the Charlie. I believe it just goes to like kind of right there. So you can technically be outside of the Charlie at any altitude you want, but I'm trying to get these aircraft down into Sacramento International. So you could say, hey, I want to be out here at 3,000. Hey, can you move 3 more miles to the west? So now you're out here in my straight, and I can vector all these downwind aircraft to miss you. All these aircraft coming in from the east are no problem. In my straight ends, you'll be west of my straight ends.
I'm asking it to help you to get a hold of you, even though we're not going somewhere, just doing maneuvering. So you have us, who we are, and what we're doing, and we're, monitoring you.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. You can, honestly, I might forget that you're there if you're not asking for flight following, because we kind of rely on those data blocks, and we can see all your information. If you're just out there on a 1200 code and I've got a bunch of other stuff going on, I might not even remember that you called me. So yeah, that 10-mile final is kind of right in here. Can we move the map a little bit so it shows?
So how far west should we go if we're going to go out west doing maneuvers? At 3,000, say, for example.
3,000 for an example I would, if I had to, okay, so yeah, that was pretty good right there. So basically if you just draw an imaginary straight line, these are the finals. If you were going to be off of Lincoln out in here, so the one that I showed you, and we'll go back to it, but the one that I showed you that's like kind of almost sits right over the top of Lincoln Airport, again, they're descending to 4,000 right there. But if they're linking up with an instrument approach, they're going to keep the descent going almost immediately as soon as they're done with at that fix. So if you wanted to be out to the west, I would say you need to be kind of somewhere, like preferably not directly north of the Charlie, because again, that's the final.
The other side of the center line.
Yeah, the west side of the extended center line is what again, every situation is so different that I can't possibly come up with every single scenario. But if I had to make a generalization, the west side of extended center line, and 3,000 is a tricky altitude, because on about a 10-mile final for Sacramento International, if you do the math on the glide slope, you want to be at about 3,000 to be on the glide slope. So that's a rough altitude, but that's tricky if you're right here. So now and I'll tell you this. Technically speaking, if you're talking to me and getting VFR flight following, and I tell you, hey, maintain 3,000 or below, and then I have a Southwest 737 that's descending from the north, and I say descend and maintain 3,500, I guarantee they're getting a TCAS RA. And when they get a TCAS RA, it starts this whole chain of events, and they're looking into it, and they're reviewing the whole thing, and they're making sure that not only did I tell you what to do, but that you read it back perfect, and that everybody complied. And we don't like getting into those situations. You learn over time. It's kind of easier to just do 1,000 feet of separation. Even though it's 500 feet is totally legal, TCAS doesn't like it. TCAS wants 700 roughly. I haven't looked into it in a while. So we'll do 1,000. Well, now they're trying to catch up on the glide slope if you're right there. So again, you know as well as I do that you are perfectly legal being out there. However, is there a better place being, kind of out in here over this, what is that, private strip, Sunrise or something? Yeah, it's a little bit better if you're going to be at 3,000.
Some people go to Folsom Lake. That's typically the go-to place for.
Yeah, that's Lake Tahoe. Folsom Lake right here. That is out of the way of almost everything, unless you're going to go kind of far to the south of Folsom Lake. The Mather 2-2 final is out in here. The only thing that you probably already know this, but there's a lot of traffic over Folsom Lake, so you might not want to be there. Cooling towers also, where are they down here? Those Eva Stars out of Mather love the cooling towers. Everybody loves the cooling towers. So they go out down over the cooling towers. So yeah, finding a place with a lack of traffic is kind of tough. And the Sutter, people love the Sutter Buttes way up here. So a lot of times, like, we'll get traffic that departs Beale, and in order to just kind of keep them out of the way, even if they're going west, we'll give them a left turn. As soon as they get enough altitude, almost all those aircraft are fast climbing aircraft, so we'll give them a left turn and kind of come out this way. Because if you go right, you're getting into Sacramento International rivals, you're getting into all of these VFRs that want to hang out over here. So, we do, for the most part, try to help ourselves and not create additional issues.
So if you call us and ask if we're on frequency, then we should take that as a message that we should have made contact with.
Are we talking about what we prefer or what's legal?
In order to be good stewards.
Yeah. Okay, no, that makes more sense. If we're reaching out to you, then we're probably like, hey, I am absolutely, like Lincoln is a great example. I've had a couple of times so that descend via kind of comes out over the top of Lincoln. They stop at 4, but then they obviously want to keep descending so they can get into the airport. I've vectored aircraft like 5 miles north of Lincoln to avoid some 1200 code that I've seen up here, only for that 1200 code to turn into my traffic. So now I'm trying to peel them apart even harder, and I've got a final that I'm working, and a final and a final and all this other stuff that I'm doing. So it kind of gets, so I might say, hey, November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are you talking to me? Yeah. Are you listening to the frequency? Yeah. Hey, can you do that maybe 5 miles east and stay at or below this certain altitude? I'm not saying you have to talk to me. I'm just saying that might be a better spot. And so we do that, and you may have heard that, especially if you fly around this airspace a lot. But yeah, there is definitely spots that I would consider, they're not charted or anything, but in my head, in my opinion, they would be hot spots. And kind of over Lincoln is one of them. North of Sacramento International is one of them. obviously like all around Beale, and then just anything around the Sacramento VOR and like McClellan, Mather airspace, that gets pretty saturated too. Sir?
That's a great follow-on question from the earlier one. Let's say that the person that was November 123, that was north of Lincoln, then turning north, he's the guy that would have had ADSB, just walking 1200, hasn't talked to you at all, but on the second channel has NorCal on there. So you see him by his call number on the data block, and you push the key, and then you kind of call the line.
If you have ADSB, then yes, I can see it.
Yeah, so he never called NorCal, just had it on the second channel, and he can hear you.
Right.
That's the deal with your traffic.
Exactly. But if you don't have ADSB, let's just say you're over Lincoln at 4,500, I can just say, hey, the aircraft's squawking 1,200 over Lincoln at 4,500. Do you happen to be listening to my frequency? And sometimes they'll respond to you. It's not always, but sometimes they'll respond to you. One of the other issues too is that like I showed the airspace before, but I'll just kind of draw a rough line. Lincoln and Auburn are kind of interesting, where they're kind of right barely north of the sector boundary for two different chunks of airspace. So we've got that Elkhorn and Buttes on the north side of that line that kind of runs. The line kind of runs roughly like right here. Elkhorn and Buttes is north of that, and Expo is south of that. They're two different frequencies, 125.4 and 127.4. So you got aircraft that will depart, and for some reason they'll be on 27.4, and which is easy to understand because the airspace boundary is right there. And the controller that's working this airspace for these arrivals is on 25.4. So now we're kind of yelling in the radar room, like, hey, can anybody see if they're talking to this aircraft? And now we're all keying up, being like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you there? So, we're just checking all of our frequencies is all we're doing. There are times where we are, especially when like earlier in the morning and later in the afternoon, we are working multiple sectors. So we're working, potentially, Elkhorn and Buttes is generally standalone until very early in the morning, overnight, and late at night. But Delta Expo Paradise, these three sectors down here, you got 3 VHF frequencies and 3 UHF frequencies. So, at those times, especially when it sounds like we might be a little bit busy, you might not hear the reply, of course, because it's going to be on a different frequency, and we get a lot of this, was that for me? Was that for me? Which is totally understandable, but that's the reason that that's happening, is because we're working a lot of different frequencies all at once. As soon as it starts to pick up, we start splitting sectors off immediately. So generally speaking, the way it goes for us is it's overnight. We're working all 5 of those sectors combined because the traffic's not that bad. We split Elkhorn Buttes pretty early in the morning, and then as soon as the VFR start coming out, Expo goes to its own scope, Delta goes to its own scope, and then Paradise is working all the high altitude stuff. So it's all super sectorized. We are staffing to the traffic. As soon as we start getting a lot of aircraft out there, it gets, especially when there's aircraft asking for practice approaches or instruments, or we get that valley fog that we've had, we are almost always splitting the sectors very early in order to not get task saturated.
At a basic level, anytime you have an emergency,
This is probably pretty
I would
good.
expect you to ask souls on board and fuel leaders.
And intentions is what technically, yeah.
My fundamental question, and then also just give me some context about what recent emergencies you've seen and how they get handled. But one of my fundamental questions is, when you ask for fuel on board, do you want it in gallons or time?
I'll take anything. All we're doing is passing that along to the firefighting people.
What do
They want it. What's that?
Time or gallons? What do they want?
I'm gonna say gallons.
And we're all small. I mean, if you're flying in pounds, it's too big to be here. But
Actually, we wanted to use.
Oh, are you firefighter? Oh, okay, cool. Then they want it in time. I don't know.
I don't know if you give me.
my bad.
I don't know.
Okay.
So how much?
30,000 pounds. How long?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's so.
Still
The way I figured it is like the burn rate of an F-18 is going to be different than the burn rate of a Skyhawk, right? So if I give you time, but the F-18 wants to come down right now, they may have way more fuel on board than a Skyhawk. So that's kind of the way.
Info, we have 2 different things we can do.
Okay.
We can look at how much fuel potential burn are we dealing with? And then time, how long can you stay airborne?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So this is what I'm asking the question too, right? Like, if I'm in an emergency, I just want to think about this ahead of like an emergency. I know why you're asking the question, so I can give you the information. And I can
Yeah.
It's always been time, because they want to know how long can you stay here.
Yeah, I'll take whatever you can give me, and if the firefighter people want something different, then whatever. I've worked a couple of emergencies where I've got like to get out tons of information in like maybe a minute. So like I actually had one not that long ago, rough running engine maybe, and they were going somewhere north, but they decided they were on an IFR flight plan, and then all of a sudden they were squawking 7,700. And I'm like, without saying anything, I'm like, hey, what's going on? They wanted to go to Marysville. Well, okay, I don't know what information they have, so I'm pulling up the weather. I'm reading them the weather as soon as I can. I'm getting the fuel. I'm getting the persons on board. I'm getting their intentions. Hey, we want to land at Marysville. Okay, now I have, do you have that one where it was zoomed in on Lincoln?
Yeah.
So I've got kind of a cool function on my STARS keyboard where I can pull up the information at Lincoln, and it's pretty close to this. So it tells me, we work Lincoln enough to know, but it's an example. It's pretty much memorized by all the controllers. It's going to tell me the runway orientation is 1533. The length of the runway and width of the runway is this. Is it an asphalt runway? Is it a grass runway? Is it a dirt runway? The CTAF frequency, and then if we want to, we can look up additional services available on the chart supplement. Like if they're looking for gas, that's not an emergency situation, but it's pretty close to this information. I'm trying to tell that aircraft all this information, and he's trying to get down on the ground as fast as he can and manage the aircraft. And everybody in here knows that communicating with ATC is the last thing you're going to do, right? Aviate, navigate, communicate. So I'm telling you all this stuff because I'm checking boxes for me. However, I don't know if you're getting any of that information. So if you give it to me, I'm just telling you this, if you give it to me in pounds and that's all I have to go off of, then that's all I have to go off of. If we have time, we'll talk about, hey, how can you say fuel remaining in time? But some of these emergencies, you don't have the time to go back and forth. I've had a couple where it's technically an emergency, but it's like a 777, and we can fly for the next 6 hours on this one engine or whatever, and you can ask them all the questions you want. That's great, but as well as I do, is if you get a Skyhawk with a rough running engine, they want to be on the ground yesterday. So to more specifically answer your question, if you just gave me gallons, I'd be like, cool, good enough. This is from a frontline air traffic controller perspective. The firefighter guys might want something different. It just is what it is. So, and I'm also trying to maybe even give you like, hey, call me on 25.4 when you're on the ground so we can make sure you're okay. And we're doing all the behind the scenes coordination with the supervisors and stuff like, hey, we need to call the airport authority to see if they can roll out some trucks, or what we have like kind of a little play sheet for all the different airports. Because like at Sacramento International, for instance, right, we can just tell the tower, hey, emergency inbound. Well, they've got a little thing called a crash phone, red phone. They just pick that up and it goes right to the firefighters, and the firefighters are right there. But getting in contact with these services at these uncontrolled airports, we have to kind of go to the playbooks. We have to make some phone calls or whatever. And every once in a while, you get the whole, like it's happened before, where it's like, whatever, Placer County Sheriff, hey, I've got an emergency coming into this. What? Who? When? They're not really sure what we're talking about. So, because they don't really deal with it on a regular basis. But at these bigger airports, they're pros. So they're used to it. That's not any ding on them. That's just saying they might not really know that they're the authority for it, or they might not be totally familiar. Generally speaking, with these uncontrolled airports, we have to get we have the Rolodex for like the airport manager and a couple of other phone numbers, and that's about it. That's like, we have like 5 people we can contact, 5 numbers that we can call, not even necessarily people. And beyond that, like we're kind of calling the sheriff or a fire department out in this area. So honestly, I'm not a pilot, so I don't know if you got on CTAF frequency and said you'd have an emergency, if any emergency services would hear that. I don't know. No? Okay, so yeah, so we do our absolute very best, and trust me, if you declare an emergency, there's like 12 people just at NorCal Tracon that are on it. So because there's only so much that I can do. I'm only one guy talking on one frequency, and I'm managing all that other traffic. Obviously, you're the highest priority. You're an emergency. But I'm still managing all the other traffic while help is coming. So they might sit down. Every position has a coordinator position, and their job is to just talk to like adjacent sectors and towers and that sort of stuff. They're almost immediately getting me a coordinator. So all I can do is focus on talking over the radio, and I don't have to talk to any adjacent facilities or anything. That person is doing it for me.
Is it crazy to ask for like a single frequency for emergency?
It might not always be available. We have, so let's say you're up here and you're on 25.4. It's a good example, right? I don't have any single frequency to give you that would accomplish the CTAF stuff. So you would eventually have to do that unless, you're an emergency, CFRs kind of go out the window during an emergency. I know that much, but, I'm guessing you want to be on CTAF, even if you're an emergency, so you can call yourself out there. Obviously, you're going to fly the airplane first, but let me give you a better example. If you're out there with Center, and you declare an emergency, but you decide you want to go to Marysville or Lincoln or whatever because it's not super urgent, there's no single common frequency that we share that they can put you on. So they would have to give you my frequency, and then at a certain point, you would have to go over to the CTAF or tower frequency. Beale has a SFA. It's called a single. So let's say they're out in the MOAs and they declare an emergency. Then I can be like, hey, put them on 269 or 0.6, and then I just key up that frequency on my little screen. And so they only have to do the frequency change once. They call me on that frequency, hey, contact NorCal approach. And then I tell the tower, hey, they're on the SFA frequency, and the tower keys it up. So single pilot military aircraft, they don't have that workload. They can just do the frequency change one time. That's the only place in my airspace that I can think of that has that, though. Sir?
Who's monitoring 121.5?
Probably every single position, plus like we have these overhead supervisor ones. They're all being monitored at every position, and because there's different sites that pick up guard frequency.
So if we call on guard, will we be directed to stay on guard or to go to one of your frequencies? That would be kind of what he's asking. So if you're flying along and you're not on any particular channel, and you switch over to guard because you don't have time to look to say, oh, who's the closest control.
Okay, that makes more sense. So what would happen is if you call me on guard, and this is kind of still along the lines of an emergency situation, right? So what I would have you do is if you're not getting flight following, I would tell you to as soon as practical squawk Mayday on 7700, and then that gives me it would automatically do that.
No, you should if you're going on.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
Switching your transponder.
Right, because I don't know what your position is if you're just out there on VFR, but if you squawk 7700, alarms start going off on our side. It starts flashing EM. So I will find your position very fast, and then I will know what frequency you might. Hey, whatever aircraft that's squawking Mayday, change my frequency, when able 125.4, or I can just talk to you right then and there. I'll tell you, 121.5 doesn't always have the best reception depending on where you are, and it just depends on where the site is that's picking you up. They're all over the place. There's one at Reno, Oakland, Sacramento. They're all over the place. So it just depends. Like if I'm working this airspace to the north, the 121.5 transmitter receiver site I think is at Marysville. So it's been a while since I've studied that one. But so I probably, if you're within a reasonable distance of Marysville, I'll probably hear you pretty good. But if you're like somewhere else to the north and the closest transmitter site is Marysville, and I'm not, I can only monitor the one transmitter site. So like, let's just say let's just say if it's true that Marysville has a site that, and I'm working Elkhorn and Buttes, the 121.5 and 243.0 that I'm monitoring is only that site. There is another thing that monitors all of them, every single one in all of the NorCal Tracon airspace, but that's like away from where I am. So if your signal can be picked up by the, again, if it's true, Marysville site, then I will hear you right there on that scope and I can reach out and talk to you. If you are too far away, hopefully another transmitter, receiver, antenna would pick you up, but it might not be the one that I'm working on this particular sector, if that makes any sense. Again, like you said, you would probably squawk Mayday on 7700. On our side, all kinds of, this alarm starts ringing. There's a big red EM that pops up on the tag. It's flashing at us, and we are on it. Like we are, hey, what's going on with that? Because it doesn't happen very much. You know, every once in a while they roll through hijack 7500 on accident or whatever, but it only happens for like a second. But if you're squawking 7700, more than likely you mean it, and we see it. Center, same thing with them, see it. There's only a couple of spots in our airspace where we are like completely blind, and it's like way down deep in the mountains, so.
So why don't we take a break now, and we'll pick this back up at 11 o'clock. Anyway, we'll check back in here in 15. Thank you, Casey. That was very good. I think everybody appreciates getting that knowledge. Thanks.